Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are on episode 14 and we are talking about connection to self. One of the biggest blessings we uncover when we break free from processed food addiction is it gives us the chance to discover our real inner self. While we're in the throngs of addiction, really our only focus has to be serving the needs of the addiction. But when we remove the addiction, we discover who we truly are for the first time. But it can only happen when we are free from the pull of distraction and have the opportunity to meet ourselves and discover who we truly are, what our passions are, and how we truly feel. Have you discovered that to be true, Jamie?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I love that we're talking about this. Connection to self is as you are going to learn today, is another one of our branches of recovery and our recovery tree of life here at Real Food Recovery. We believe connection to self is absolutely critical in recovery from any addiction, but especially as we come out of the processed foods and we're in a world that is so focused on the processed foods. It's
Mhm.
really critical for us to be aware how to stay connected to ourselves, why it's even necessary, how to discover the true selves that we all have deep inside, which many of us, myself included, used food to cover up for years.
Mhm.
How to begin to reconnect with that self, right? How to look at our family of origin, how to, heal if there were wounds, how to heal from those wounds. If there are any childhood triggers, how to uncover and discover those and reintegrate those in a healthy way into your emotional responses. And also, something called reparenting, which is something that I'm really deep into myself in this phase of my recovery. It's been a game changer for me in that connection, my own connection to self. Um, but I really feel like my connection to myself and all the parts of me that I
Mm.
spent years eating over and
Mhm.
rejecting, helps
Mhm.
me. My connection to self helps me self-soothe. It helps me self-connect in ways that I wasn't willing to do before, in ways that I wasn't able to do before. Yeah, it's a game changer.
Yeah, I think for me too, there's been a greater degree of self-connection, self-awareness. Really, a whole new world has opened up. Even doing a podcast requires huge thinking that I probably would not have been able to pull off before. I just finished a wellness coaching certification that again requires deep think, deep thought, and connecting to myself helps me. I'm on board with myself. I'm a team with myself. We can work together to accomplish goals. So, we have so much talk about this, and you hear a lot of discussion out in the world about connecting to yourself. How did you find your true self after you began recovery? Did that just happen for you, or what did you do? People don't know. How do you take the first step? What do you
Yeah.
do?
So I spent so many years running away from myself, running away from who I was, who I thought I was, and running and pursuing things outside of me, right? Because I was trying to get away from what was happening in my
Hmm.
inner experiences. And after spending so many years sort of rejecting me, um, recovery has been the journey back to me. And I had to take, and I still take very conscious steps every day to learn who I am,
Hmm.
and to uncover different parts of me and sides of me that I've spent so many decades trying to run away from.
Yeah. Let's talk about what's been the biggest surprise as we're discovering
Yeah,
these new people. What has been the biggest surprise through
I
your recovery journey?
I want to hear what you have to say here because this is a great
So,
question.
uh, don't laugh, but I have never been a great reader. I mean, I hated it all through school. My comprehension is low, very highly active, highly I am probably hyperactive person, and so being forced to sit down and read and then comprehend was torture. Torture. I hated it, but I have learned to love to read. I'm now reading big girl books for fun on my own. No one's forcing me to do anything. I am doing it on my own, seeking books out, and I really am enjoying reading before bedtime. I can't
Mhm.
wait to go and read. Um, and all the other things that everything else in life is just become a bit sweeter. I'm a scrapbooker. I love exercising, family relationships, crafts with grandkids,
Mm.
And it's just easier. It's all easier. Life is just
Yeah.
easier when you're clean and you can enjoy it more. You can be present and focus on plans for future things.
Yes.
Otherwise, I would be just focusing on when can I get my next fix? When can
Yeah.
I be alone so I can get my next fix? So my world got bigger. We talk about this a lot. When you're in the food, your world gets smaller.
Totally.
And you're not connecting to yourself. You're numbing out. You're doing the
Exactly.
opposite of connecting to yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't
Let's
want to have
let's be
anything.
honest about that.
Yeah, you don't want to have anything to do with yourself or anybody else.
Yeah.
It's so sad and empty. So, what about
Mhm.
you?
Agreed. I the biggest surprise I had about myself in recovery was that I had likes and dislikes. I had preferences. I had, opinions. I've always been
Mhm.
opinionated about other people, but I wasn't really opinionated about me, like asserting what I
Mm.
wanted and what I needed.
Mhm.
And I like that I can present all of me now. I've always been very self-aware, but recovery has made me even more self-aware. And I'm really grateful for all that I'm learning about myself. The last few years, I take myself out on, I call them Jamie dates. I take myself out and I do things that are, especially when I was, before I moved to Texas and got remarried, I had, 6, 7 years that I just could, do things for me that really appealed to me. And I would, explore, and I took myself to the opera. I took myself
Oh,
to
wow.
all kinds of different performances. I took myself into New York City and to Broadway
Oh,
shows. And I just, did all these things that I really wanted to do. And it was a lot of freedom to do all those things, and to have all those experiences and to scratch all those itches that I had for culture and for creativity. And so hiking and time outdoors and exploring different parks and other things, something that that I think has been the biggest surprise.
I marvel at women that are willing to go to the dinner out to dinner, to a movie, to all those
Yeah.
different things by themselves. That is like Herculean stuff for me. So I bow down to you. For those of you that can't see me, I was bowing down to
Thank you.
her. So whenever you are in this world of self exploration, how do you encourage yourself when you try something new?
Mm,
For me, I mostly just do a little pep talk with
yeah.
myself that I can at least try. So I have a story about that. My youngest daughter had to come home after her first 2 years at KU because she was applying to nursing schools and they did not have a nursing program on that campus in Lawrence,
Okay.
Kansas. So she had to go somewhere. So she had to come home during that time. And that meant leaving her sorority, her boyfriend that was on the football team, all of her friends, all of her connections, and she just came home to live with mom and dad. So that was a real fun time here at Casa Alexander for a girl who's 20 and coming back home to mom and dad with no friends here. Everybody had left to go away to college. So thing that she did in addition to starting her nursing program was she started running in her spare time, and she decided she wanted to run a half marathon. Where this came from, I had no idea because she wasn't a runner. She had not run at all. So she just said, I think I'm going to run a half marathon. I was running at that time. I used to run up until I was in my later 50s when my old lady hips and knees said you're going to have to do different things. So I was just running 5, 6, 7 miles at a time. I'd run a 10K before. I had run 12 miles, at one time or another. But this girl was a couch potato beforehand, and she decided to do something. So I told her, here's what I'll do. I'm going to start training with you up to the mileage where I decide that I just can't go any further. But we were just adding 1 mile a week. That's how you prepare for a half, just one extra mile a week. So on our long days, otherwise the days are short. And I told her I'm going to keep doing it with you as long as I can. So I just kept doing it, and before I knew it, I had a half marathon under my belt, all because I just tried with an open mind, and I kept going for the next couple of years till my body said, "No, you're done with that." My goal, I think the very first marathon was like 2 hours and 22 minutes or something, and I had started doing several. She quit after that half marathon. She did it, she done, back to
Yep,
couch
yep.
potato, but, my goal was to eventually beat 2 hours and 10 minutes. That was my goal, and I think I had done about 6,
Mm,
and this was the Las Vegas, rock and roll half marathon. It took place at night, down the
yeah,
strip. It was very exhilarating. There's music, miles of people, just
yeah,
throngs of people lined, and we're giving people a high five the whole way down. It was very
good
exhilarating, but
half marathon to do.
it was, and little did I know at that time that would be my last. And my time was 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 59 seconds, which
Nice.
counts. So I reached my goal, and I had this life moment just because I was willing to try something out of my comfort zone, able to discover who I really was, what
Yeah,
I was really made of. You find out what you're made of during those times that you push
right.
yourself. The greatest challenges reap the greatest rewards, and I had never done anything like that on that level before, so I had a great sense of pride, and, yeah, I was very sad when I had to get that up, but now I'm finding, because I had experienced that high and how good I felt
Yeah,
by doing something big, where so I when I couldn't run because of my hips and knees, I'm like, "Okay, that doesn't mean I'm stopping
that's right.
with big
Just
events." How
keeping.
else? So now I change it to mountain climbing and doing
Yep.
things like that. So I just shifted. So that's
Yeah,
how I encourage myself to keep going from something that was nothing to something that was a big part of my life. What about you?
exactly. Yeah. I had a lot of um gym experiences that I had to, keep evolving. And when COVID hit and gyms closed and I had to kind of pivot my workouts to home. And I remember that was a big shift for me to figure out what I could do at home that was still friendly to my body, friendly to my joints, but still challenged me. I was living in a place that I could get outside and walk um, at least an hour a day, and I just loved being outside walking. So there was a lot of that. There was also a lot of different kind of strength training and body weight training and other things that I challenged myself with. And then when the gyms opened up again, I didn't want to go back. I went back for a little bit and hated it and just said, okay, I'm just going to do the home gym thing. And it's giving me an opportunity to try out new things or try out
Mhm.
things that I used to do in the gym, but I can now bring into the home. And I really encouraged myself, right? Because it was, lonely at first, right? It was kind of just me, 5 a.m. in the morning, doing my thing. And I found that the more I online classes I did with people that I wanted to learn from, the more I looked forward to it. And so I would encourage myself by giving myself a new style of music or a new instructor to learn from. And I encouraged myself when, I would have a community that I could connect with while I was doing my workouts. That was a very big deal. And I just keep going, right? Just one more day,
Yeah.
just today, just do it today. And sure enough,
Mhm.
the next day and the next day. And I don't put a lot of pressure on myself for the big long, you know, forever and ever. You're going to have to do this. It's just for today. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah. So, in finding out who we really are and connecting with ourself, do you feel like through that process you found out what things help you feel calm?
Mm. Uh, Deep breathing
Yeah.
always helps me. Grounding myself, right? Taking my shoes off and just putting them right on the grass or on the earth helps
Mhm.
me. Being organized really helps me stay focused and keep all my wits about me, because if I'm in
Mhm.
a really messy room or a messy home, it just doesn't. I'm not. I don't feel calm at all. I feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
how about you?
Yeah, a few deep breaths, like you said, a plan. I have got to be organized. I am a nervous wreck if there's not an organized plan going on. That's probably why travel gets me thrown off so much, because these airlines, when things don't go well, I'm like, who is in charge? What's going on? What's the plan? It's
Right.
not, it's not good for me. It's not a good place for me to be
Oh,
in.
tell me about it.
Um, a good nap helps me stay
Yes.
calm and reconnect with myself. And like you said, being outside, I like that as well.
Yes.
Is there some part of yourself that you've discovered in recovery that you didn't know was there? what can you do now that you're off of processed food that you really could not do before when you're deep into the food? As we're talking about self-connection, this really opens up a big window into, wow, I can do these things. For me, I literally never thought I could get off sugar. That's one thing that we're talking about the same thing, but I never thought I could
Yeah.
do that. That is so monumental. I actually was just in a meeting before we started this and was talking to someone about processed food
Hmm.
recovery, and she's like, "You mean you don't eat it at all?" And I'm like, "No." She said, "How did you do that?" I mean, she was literally marveling that that's inconceivable that you could actually do that, and now I can get through family events without it. It gets easier. I have found out what triggers me, and those triggers do get less powerful as we rewire those neural pathways in our
Exactly.
brain. Cravings get less. They're not gone. My cravings are not gone by any means, but they're less. And that may be one of the biggest accomplishments of my life, even greater than my math minor, getting through
Ah,
calculus 1, 2, and 3.
yeah, that's
That's what
impressive.
I used to brag about is calculus 3. Now it's like I got myself off sugar. It's right up there, but I get emotional every time I think about breaking free from those sugar binges. It was such a dark place. It
Yes.
was so painful. Traumatic,
Yes.
traumatic free fall. I mean, so being able to do that, there's no way that I would have ever been able to really discover the
Mm,
truest parts of me had I not gotten off sugar.
yes. Agreed. Agreed. I think the part of me, there's so many parts of me that I discovered a whole new version of myself that was always there, just
Mhm.
covered under
Yes.
shame and regret and self-hatred and rejection, self-rejection, processed foods, of course. And what was always inside is now on the outside. I still have, a lot of things that I'm working through, childhood lessons that I'm learning how to integrate, and some fear that I'm learning how to conquer. But I can't believe that these parts of me are now on the outside, and
Mm.
it's really just a whole new life outside of the food.
Oh, I agree. This opens up room for new goals in our life that we never even thought I would have never even thought to set some of these goals. But right now, my biggest goal is just to stay calm in all situations. I work on that still. And
Yep.
I also now know I can do hard things.
Yeah.
I can do hard things. And that self talk is so huge in accomplishing those
Yes.
goals.
Yes. Absolutely. I have goals for this podcast, right? Goals
Mhm.
for my book that I'm writing, goals for my professional and personal life, goals to travel, service to others is something that I do every day and on a regular basis every week. So it's something that, when I think about, it's opened up room for new goals. I'm, being able to create programs and create, homes and create experiences that I did not have the capacity to do before.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, this is kind of a tongue in cheek uh, topic, but when we are spending all this time talking about self connection, it's me, 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 me. Isn't that selfish? If we are worrying about ourselves first, is that not selfish? How do you put yourself first, in other words, without feeling guilty,
Mm,
like you're just too self
yeah. What are your
involved?
thoughts on that?
I work on a balance in that department and I'm getting much better, but I really have learned that putting on my oxygen mask first,
Yeah.
everyone else benefits.
Mhm.
And so it is a balance and it can't all be about you,
Mhm.
but you certainly need to spend some time in that area to
Yes.
to be a whole full functioning being.
Yes.
What do you think?
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
think it's selfish?
No, I don't. I think that's a lesson that I've learned finally. The word selfish is a word that I have a lot of, it brings up a lot of emotion inside me whenever I hear
Mm,
that word. It's a sort of a sordid history with that word. The short answer is I've learned, no, it's not selfish to put me first. If I have nothing in my tank to give to others, but I
Mhm.
constantly give, I become resentful. And
Mhm.
that's not the way that I need to live my life. I've done it. It just, there's no good that comes out of it. So I have to make sure that filling my own tank first happens, and then I'm able to be present and give to others. And it's so interesting. After growing up for many years, I was called selfish by family members who were going through their own pain, and they were,
Mhm.
choosing to call a child selfish instead of really exploring what was going on with them. And so I just assumed that I was, right? I grew up assuming that I was really selfish and didn't um, have a selfless bone in my body, but that's not true. And so once I understood that, and I thought, oh, okay, like that was about their stuff, not mine. I
Mhm.
was able to be much more um, accepting of all the ways that putting myself first isn't selfish, because then I'm able to do so much more uh, for the world.
For others. Oh, yeah, I love that. I love that turnaround, and it's so true. It's so true. Good for you coming to that place, and that
Thanks.
takes time, wisdom,
It did.
maturity, and experience. Yeah.
It
So,
did.
as we're on this path of self-discovery, self-connection, do you feel like through that process, it's easier for you to identify and understand how you're feeling, identify your feelings in the moment? Do you think that's like a quicker process? Do you think
Mhm.
you're able to tap into that sooner?
Yeah. I just learned no, like 7 years ago, I just learned that feelings were called feelings because we're meant to feel them in our bodies. Like that is why
Mhm.
they're called that word. I had no idea. They're not just words, and I used to think feelings were just words that I had in my head about thoughts that I had, right? Like I'm thinking this, so I must be feeling this. Right. That's how I connected feelings. I had no idea that they were actually experienced in our physical bodies. And so now I understand that, and I let them kind of move through. I let them, sometimes they're there for an hour or two, sometimes they're there for a day, sometimes they're there for minutes. But I allow them to move through me. To identify how I'm feeling has been a big, big help in my recovery for sure. How about you?
Yeah, I have to stop. Like sometimes I'm like, I feel something's off base here, something's off kilter. And so I have to stop and just ask myself, why am I feeling that way? And let me just walk it back. Let me,
Yeah.
like if you lost your car keys, let me retrace my steps
Yeah.
to find out what's the origin of this. So introspection has come easier. But when I'm feeling ick on the inside, I literally have to stop and say, not out loud always, but just what happened to bring this on? Let's take a look and retrace our steps here, and then I'm able to like put my finger right on it and go,
Right.
ah, okay, and then I can decide what to do about it, which leads into the topic of how do you even know what you're feeling? How can you get more comfortable sharing, even with others that you care about what you're
Yeah.
feeling?
Good
How,
question.
how do you learn to label your feelings? How do you do that?
Uh, I I was exposed to the feelings wheel
Mm,
often, and I work with others who utilize it. It's you can find it online anywhere for free. It's just a picture of a wheel with a bunch of different pie pieces in it, and it talks about all this sort of core emotions like anger and sadness and fear and joy and or happiness, excuse me. And then it will kind of branch out from there into these nuances of all of those major emotions. Uh,
mhm,
and it allows me just to sort of feel the differences and discern what I'm really feeling versus what I think I'm feeling.
yeah.
And the next step is to feel it in my body, right? So where do I feel it in my body? That is something that is the next phase for me.
I'm a slow processor, so I'm not it just doesn't jump out at me. I've not used those, feeling wheels or anything like that, so that might be something I look into,
Good
but
stuff.
it usually just takes me a day or 2 of just sitting with it
Yeah.
and helping to analyze where I am And
Yes.
then let's say I have a feeling around someone that somebody's done something to me, or that I am feeling disconnected from someone. I have learned through the years that just it never helps to approach in a confrontational way. I always try to make it palatable to the receiver.
Mhm.
So I'm able to I'm better at thinking things through with how I want to approach in my wording if I stop and give myself a day or two to think it through
Yeah.
before I interact with someone. And I have found I recently had an experience with my husband where we were having to talk about something, and my first approach was I started here's my one-liner, ladies, listen in. Uh, because I love you so much and I care about our marriage, I was just wondering, you know, can you help me understand why this, and this took place so I can process that and do better if I need to make some changes. But immediately people are off the defense, the communication is
Right.
open versus so many people just want to pow right in there
Right.
and just head on, and immediately the other person is on the defense and you get nowhere.
Right.
It's illogical. It's a waste of everyone's time. And uh, taking a day or two to think things through is, I've learned as I've aged, just
Mhm.
very wise. And so it
Yes.
brings up the question of how do you learn to even trust yourself? Is self trust the same as self love? I think self trust is the same as self love, but age and
Yes.
maturity really do help in that area. Definitely have more access to our frontal lobe, which helps us to think things through to the end. So we
Mhm.
talk in here a lot
Yeah.
about processed food addiction. So you've got the center brain and the frontal lobe. I'll do a 1 minute science lesson. When you are in the food, you are operating from a place here at the back of the brain, the survival mode. That's where that houses the addiction, sex, drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping,
Mm.
whatever. So
Yep.
the blood flows back there. That means your frontal lobe in the front here, that houses your logic center, your
Decision
consequences,
making.
decision making, braking system, long term consequences. It's left barren
Mhm.
when when you're in the food, but whenever you get out of the food, the blood flow just is sitting here in the
Yeah.
frontal lobe, and it's those long-term consequences, thinking through 10 steps down the road, that is such a gift when
Yes.
you're eating clean, and relationships get better, everything in your life gets
Yes.
better. Do you trust yourself? Have you learned through this self-connection to trust yourself and love yourself?
I have, and it took me a long time because I didn't trust myself, and I'd really abandoned myself. I spent most of my life abandoning myself or rejecting myself. So of course I didn't trust myself.
Mhm.
Um, and now, it was absolutely worth it. And I never forget when I was living alone for the first time and, was really trying to understand, who I was as an adult. And I was really standing up for myself. I was doing actions that kept me in recovery, kept my food clean. And I was thriving in lots of ways. And I remember falling asleep, one night and this little voice said, "I love you," inside me. And I thought,
Oh.
oh, that must be one of my, I didn't know it at the time, but one of the parts of me that I'd spent rejecting for so many years. And I was caring for her and I was protecting her and I was, making sure that she had everything she needed. And that I'd always look to others to do that. Right.
Right.
Now I was doing it for myself for the first time. And that was a big deal.
Is that where self-esteem comes from? How do you develop self-esteem? How do you know when you have it?
Yeah.
What's the process for that?
Self-esteem for me is all about credibility. And in the work that I do, my 9 to 5 work that I do, um, I do a lot in leadership development and we talk a lot about leaders, right? Any kind of leader, not just a boss, but an actual leader in an organization needs to develop, the real critical piece of leadership is credibility. And you don't get credibility unless you do what you say you will do. So that is when we do what we say we will do, that builds credibility. Credibility is the best and biggest currency for leaders. So when I think about self-esteem, right, how do I want to esteem me? I do what I say I'm going to do. And I know when I have it, when I'm confident that when I give my word, I will follow through on something.
I agree. I agree completely. And I think when you do a job well done, when you've done a good job, it's so
Mhm,
worth it. That's
mhm.
we were talking in our last episode about big life lessons, and one of the biggest ones for me was that learning that shortcuts always take the longest time, and doing
Yes.
things right the first time actually is a time saver, and you feel so much self-worth that comes
Yeah.
from a job well done. So that's interesting that you're talking about how you calculate that, which brings up another subject about ourselves and doing things alone and our own, which leads into the topic of spending time alone. Do
Mhm.
you enjoy spending time alone more now? Is it more comfortable? Look forward to it? How do you
Mm.
savor time alone and feel that connection to self?
Yeah. I used to not wanna be alone. I used to really not feel comfortable being by myself. It was something that was really just, made my skin crawl, honestly. I could not, 'cause I had so many thoughts, I had so many emotions that I wasn't used to dealing with them, so I had no idea what to do. Like, I used to
Mhm.
dread weekends, I used to dread Fridays, I used to dread the end of the week because it was like, "Okay, I know what I'm supposed to do 9 to
Unstructured.
5 on Monday through Friday. Now what?
Mhm.
Now what?"
Mhm.
And, it's so it's so interesting the more time now that I spend alone, not too much, but it has to be peppered in there, because when I don't have my alone time, I can get resentful.
Mhm. No, I like alone time too. I've gotten better at that as well. Just puttering around the house in the quiet. I make sure my kitchen counters are clean, which is awesome. There's no crumbs anywhere. I used to hate alone time, and I would worry about binging too if I was home alone, but no more. I'm really calm with
Mhm,
my alone time, and I structure it.
mhm.
I mean, I loosely structure it so I can't get into boredom, but I
Right.
always have a running list of things I could do, but it's just a slower, quieter pace. I
Mhm.
do not mind it at all.
What
So,
about, what about burnout? Are you able to tell when burnout is setting in?
yeah, and
Other
that
side, right?
say that again?
The other side of it, the other side
Yeah,
of
the other
mhm.
side of that, that's right. And I can be a driver. I think you've labeled that when when we first started working together, that was your adjective for me, and I'm like, "Yep, I've heard that one before," and it's true. And I
Mhm.
am a driver, and sometimes I need to temper that a little bit with slowing down because I will push too far to where exhaustion sets in, and then you're still pushing through that, and then you get sleep deprived and things like that. So I'm able to tune into everything now a little bit better and set limits with myself, especially on with bedtime. I need to make
Yes.
sure my sleep is protected. If I can get a good night's sleep, I can handle most of what comes my way. So I have turned to that as a huge priority. Last night, our air conditioner went out. And of course, we're discovering this at 9 o'clock, which is already past my bedtime. And I'm texting the guy, and he's like, "Well, go turn off your air conditioner." Okay, I did that. I said, "The fan's still running." Okay, well, go turn off the other there's a separate unit we
Yeah,
have upstairs that runs the upper part of the house. And I'm like, "But I'm in bed already." And that I knew that would get me riled up. I did not want to do that, but and so I was past my limits.
right.
I was past my bedtime. I was past my limit.
Yeah,
Didn't want to get my slippers on and march upstairs to do anything. It seemed big at the time. Now looking back, that was silly. That took, 1 full minute. And he
I
had
get
the
it now.
data. Yeah, we got the air conditioner to finally kick off. And had I let it go all night, probably would have blown up the whole thing. But
Mm.
so yes, I need to temper my pushing and know when to settle myself down. What about you?
Oh, same. For sure, for sure. I can feel it coming, in my thoughts and my body sensations, if I'm very tense, if I'm a lot of
Mhm.
racing thoughts, or if I'm dropping balls, right, in different
Mhm.
areas of my life, and then I have to speak
Mhm.
up, say, "Hey, you know, I'm crying uncle here. I need a little
Yeah.
space. I need a
Yeah.
little time."
And don't you get better at that crying uncle and going, "Hey,
Yes.
it's okay just to speak up." That is just an okay thing. So I think that's another skill set that we
And
learn through
many
connecting.
oh, for sure. Many of the times it is all in our head. Other people don't see us, in that way, but we don't necessarily. we don't necessarily realize that if we don't keep speaking up, if we don't keep being aware of it, it can get the best of us.
Oh, I agree. It's interesting. There's so many components with self connection, and one of them is forgiveness. And I
Yes.
don't know that we talk about that enough, but when you are better connected to yourself, don't you think you're better able to forgive yourself and others as well?
Yes, that's been my experience for sure. I
Yeah.
have, when I'm better connected to myself, I am able to see my fallibility, my humanity, and I'm
Mhm.
also able to, leverage the forgiveness, right? Forgiveness is not something that was taught to me. It was not something it was actually the opposite was taught to me, unfortunately. And so forgiveness is something that I'm learning in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
So
and I
self-forgiveness, other forgiveness, yeah.
yeah, so as I was talking about before, connection to self, so my self-talk has gotten better on all levels, and this is one of those areas where it shows up. It's
Yeah.
easier for me to be understanding with myself, and then when I can get there, then I can also be understanding
Yes.
with others much more readily. So have
Agreed.
you found that you are better able to ask for help or support when you need it? We were kind of starting to talk about that, but do you think that having that closer connection to yourself has allowed you the confidence, I guess, is
Yep.
the right word?
Yep. And confidence, and it's also there's nobody that's going to come and do it for me. So I have to speak up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not great at asking for help. I've never been that. I just try to strategize. How can I figure out how to do things for myself? But yes, I have gotten better, especially if I'm worked up over a situation. I think I found it's better to discuss it with a trusted friend, and that helps with a positive
I agree.
reframe. So values, let's talk about values
Yeah.
for a minute. Do you think your life truly reflects the things that are important to you? When you've learned to self-connect, when we've gone through this process of recovery, do you think now that you're living this true authentic life, or that you act in a way that is a reflection of your true self consistent with your values?
Hmm. So I did a values exercise back in 2016 when I was on my own and for the first time in a long time. And I had to sort of ascertain what my values were. I didn't even know what my values were. I didn't even know what I stood for back then.
Mhm.
And now I whiteboarded a whole bunch of words at the time, and I narrowed it down to five. Typically, you can have 3 to 5 as your personal values, and they should be aspirational, right? If you know that love and respect and um, honesty, right? If you know that those are things that you really live by all the time, they're not necessarily going to make the best values because you live by them all the time already.
Mhm.
Things that are the best values are the things that you um, aspire to, that it takes a little bit of intention to get there. So when I did my values list, it was discipline and service and abundance and gratitude and authenticity are my values. And so when I'm struggling with something, I ask myself, is there a part of this acronym, or not really acronym, but these 5 letters, is there a part of this values list that I have, um, uh, am I aligning to them, or am I aligning myself to something else? And if the answer is yes, that you're aligning to them, Jamie, then things tend to work out in ways that that reward that. But if I'm not aligned to them, I can be easily swayed.
Mhm. Right. So one of the measuring tools that I use in this area, am I acting in a way that's a reflection of my true self, is
Yes.
how do you behave when no one is watching? And so far I'm happy with who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Um I'm proud of myself. I'm not hiding in an addiction whenever I'm alone.
Right.
I want to feel proud of who I am when nobody's watching. So
I love
that's
that.
really my measuring tool.
I love
Do
that. I love that.
you have
Let's
any Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the takeaway
Yeah,
for from
please.
this episode. We don't have time for viewer questions this week, but anytime you have a viewer question or a comment, please go ahead and leave it in the chat. You can certainly also find us on Facebook, on TikTok, on YouTube, and also on Instagram. So at Real Food Recovery, or Real Food Recovery 23 if you're on Instagram. And when we think about takeaways from this episode, Paige, we see it again and again in the research that people who are disconnected from themselves are more likely to self-medicate with food or addictions when they experience negative emotions, right? So whenever they have these negative emotions like sadness, anger, confusion, or stress, or feel their life is unsatisfactory or has no purpose, they're going to reach for those behaviors, those addictive behaviors. So often we commit to staying in touch with friends and coworkers, current events in the world, whatever, but we're not necessarily taking the time to stay in touch with us, and our changing feelings and our needs and our sensations and our thoughts. That's the way out, right? Of this sort of selflessness that we live in. There are ways to remedy the situation, pausing a few times throughout the day, checking how connected you feel, and committing to getting to know yourself so you can become your own best friend is absolutely 100% true, life-changing. And really, we have to think about recognizing our reactions. So when we respond to our needs and feeling it, that we can take better care of ourselves, or really good care of ourselves, ideally, we need to make sure that we're focusing on how we feel and taking note of where we are, what we need, because that protects us from getting too far down the road with depression and anxiety and engaging in numbing behaviors, which is something that we don't, that food, right, is a numbing behavior, will take us right back into our old thought patterns that don't serve us anymore. And it's not to say that we don't have old thought patterns, we don't have negative emotions anymore. I certainly do. I certainly have them, but it helps us cope more thoughtfully.
Yeah, that's it. We really hope that this episode will touch a lot of hearts and make for happier people. This was a special joy for us to produce this episode, and we really hope that it has opened up some self-reflection for all of you listeners, and it will open the door for progress for you to become more connected to yourself, which allows you to become more connected to others, which allows you to become more connected to the universe. We're just so glad you're here with us. Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll see you next time. Thanks,
Thanks all.
guys.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.